Hi, my name is Sarah Dzik, and the reason our group chose to discuss the topic of stigma surrounding mental health among youth is because of the mental health crisis high school youth in America are facing today. I recently went to a conference and heard a high school counselor present. He was saying how many of the high schoolers he sees are scared to bring up their struggles due to the many recent school shootings. He said school shootings have increased the stigma surrounding mental health and that high schoolers don't want to be thought as a possible shooter. We are here today to inform you all about the possible ways to reduce stigma and bring light to the important topic of mental health amongst the youth you work with. Now, Denise Hazen is going to talk about how society and our social world impacts mental health.
Hi, I'm Denise. So, talking about how our social world impacts mental health, we first want to talk about the influence of others. So, the influence of others has always been an important part of human life and development. And the influx of influence has increased exponentially in the last 15 years. And today, young people are impacted more heavily by their peers due to social media and our handheld devices that go with us everywhere. How does this influence the ability of youth to seek care for mental health concerns? We all know that technology and social media is not going anywhere, so how can we utilize these existing services to help young people learn about mental health and to seek help when they need it? Studies have shown that the integration of helping services with our current technologies is a better method of helping attack stigma than isolated services. Does this mean offering more online counseling services? The answer might surprise you. While online helping services have their appeal, evidence has shown that many young people actually prefer a more traditional helping service. They prefer actual connection with a real person where they can be encouraged versus the depersonalized experience of an online service with the added concern of security and confidentiality. When we look at humankind as we were created, we can see that we were created to be in community with God and with others. This has many relevant connections to the issues of mental health affecting youth today, as well as means for attacking that issue. Therefore, it would be best to utilize community and connection with others to combat the isolation of mental health concerns and stigma. When a young person knows of someone close to them who has sought help for their mental health, they are more likely to seek help themselves. This positive effect is compounded when they are encouraged to do so by someone they trust. The key here is to acknowledge a mental health need in an adolescent and then communicate your concern to them in a positive way, with the recommendation of help. One of the most important keys to a young person seeking help is their attitude about the helping service. A positive attitude is almost always the factor in transition from being open to influence and then formally seeking help. Oftentimes, the first step to getting care after recognition is an online search for what services are available. Even though many young people express concerns with online services for mental health, they can still be utilized as a foot in the door service, as well as providing the added benefit of reducing the stigma behind mental health concerns, as each exposure to the unknown removes bits of fear. More work needs to be done on creating these stepping stone services and implementing them within existing technology platforms. In the realm of exposure to reduce stigma, one social media campaign titled One Voice was used to raise awareness about mental health. The campaign was found to be effective because the participants who were interviewed later recalled the campaign and said that they would be comfortable seeking help if they had a mental health concern. The more knowledge, the more exposure, the less stigma. This has shown to be true across the board and now is the time to use the technology that we have to create more awareness about signs of mental health concerns and then clarity about what to do next. There are many reasons why youth avoid disclosing their mental health concerns. Shame, fear, and isolation are the biggest concerns, as well as concerns about the impact it will have on their friendships and success at school. The influence of parents, guardians, and other authorities can also prevent a young person from disclosing their concerns. But research has shown that stigma dissipates the more people disclose their experiences. Many students in the cited research share that there was very little, if any, discussion about mental health challenges in school. This diverse group of students also reported that the information that was discussed was negative, and terms such as crazy were used to discuss mental health between peers. Teachers agreed that this was the stigma they had observed and that the only formal discussion of mental health challenges were in health class, which actually covered very little information. Fears both students and teachers have shared about disclosing mental health concerns included bullying, gossiping, and isolation from friends. Even at home, students noted a lack of mental health discussion even after they had received a diagnosis. They reported feeling as if parents were ignoring a part of who they are, and high school students in the study saw the lack of discussion about their mental health concerns as a rejection of that part of them. Some individuals even experienced segregation from family members who felt that they would be a negative influence on younger members of the extended family. On the other hand, those who did experience open discussion of their mental health at home had positive outlooks on their home environment. Parents who encouraged communication with their child about their feelings and struggles had a better outlook on mental health. In the cited study, all of the participants from youth without mental health concerns, those with diagnoses, and their parents and teachers all noted that there were positive outcomes for disclosing mental health concerns, and those included decreased stigma, replacing shame with a sense of victory when their stories of courage, strength, and empowerment were shared, the ability to help others who have not disclosed, feeling like they were not alone, and normalizing the experience. While fear will always be there as a method to keep us in isolation, the more discussion that takes place about what issues are a part of normal development and what are mental health concerns, the more we can combat confusion, fear, and rejection of help. Now, Sarah Merritt will share with you about what can be done to reduce the stigma of mental illness.
According to Kring and Johnson, psychological disorders remain the most stigmatized of conditions in the 21st century, despite advances in the public's knowledge about the origins of psychological disorders. Mental health professionals have tried to change the stigma by creating awareness among the public. The public's knowledge has increased, but unfortunately, the stigma has not decreased. So, if simply talking about mental illness and creating awareness isn't enough, what do we do? We are on the right track with creating awareness, but we need to be more strategic than that. Michaels, Kosteluk, and Butler dig deeper into this issue by concluding that we need to figure out a way to create awareness by attaining specific behavior change and eliminating the stigma of mental illness. Past initiatives to change public stigma have predominantly involved protest, which increases awareness, education, which increases knowledge, and contact, which involves individuals with lived experience sharing their stories. Contact has shown to be the most effective initiative by far, which indicates that activating a level of empathy in the audience is key. It is also important that the facilitator focuses on having a high level of credibility to have an impact. The facilitator must capture and maintain the attention of the audience. The information must be relevant to the audience. The facilitator needs to engage the audience so they're actively thinking about the information, and there must be an emotional appeal. If these factors are present, stigma will be decreased via behavior change. Since web interaction and social media have become so popular, especially among adolescents, it is important that we focus on ways to reach individuals through their resources. Kim and Stout focus on the effects of interactivity on information processing and attitude change, with implications for mental health stigma. User-to-contact interaction is examined in this study. Interactivity engages users cognitively and increases motivation for and involvement with learning. In this study, the participants were given a web-based questionnaire measuring pre-existing perceptions on schizophrenia. Participants then navigated through a stimulus website that contained the life story of an individual with schizophrenia. Individuals then completed a post-manipulation questionnaire. The results of the study showed that interactivity of web-based communication had significant desirable effects on attitudinal dimensions of mental illness stigma, including perceptions of dangerousness, desired social distance, and perceptions of severity of mental illness. It should be noted that the web-based stimuli involves contact. This study shows that utilization of the web can be a useful, efficient, and productive way to help decrease the stigma of mental illness. Shanley, Austin, Klein, and Curios performed a similar study to test the effects of Reach Out Central, an online gaming program designed to support the mental health of people aged 16 through 25. This study focused on how the game affected alcohol use, coping strategies, psychological distress, life resilience and satisfaction, changes in mental health literacy, mental health stigma, willingness to seek help, and program satisfaction. In ROC, the player takes on the role of a character who is new in town. The player must navigate settling in, making friends, and finding their way around. The player interacts with other characters in this process in addition to having access to a coach. The navigation through real-life scenarios with real potential consequences helps individuals think through solutions to problems they may actually encounter. For example, the mood meter in the game is affected by different activities such as sleeping, which then affects social interaction. Players can engage in different mood-altering actions such as exercise to improve mood meter. Results showed positive improvements across all outcome measures for females, and improvement across most measures for males. It is important to note that the game led to improved attitudes towards seeking help from mental health professionals, reduction in use of unhealthy coping mechanisms, and increased resilience. Although some inconsistencies between genders were noted, ROC appears to enhance protective factors for the prevention or early intervention of mental health disorders, and provides another example of how the internet can be utilized to change the stigma of mental illness. Based on the compilation of this research, it is important for us to focus on reaching our audience and changing the stigma of mental health through utilizing their resources, especially web-based, and ensuring productive communication. Now I will turn it over to Sarah Dzik to talk about recognizing signs of mental illness and how to encourage youth to seek help.
According to the Surgeon General, about 20% of youth suffer from a mental health disorder. In order for youth to understand mental health and be able to seek help, they must first be literate in what mental health is. Research shows that youth-based high school programs have proven effective because youth respond positively to their peers when learning about mental health. If a peer is responding well to and speaking up about mental health issues, other peers are also more likely to do so as well. Evidence also suggests that youth are more likely to respond positively or negatively to mental health, depending on how their parents have talked about mental health while they were growing up. In order for youth to seek help in the area of mental health, it is important that parents of youth start talking about mental health in a positive way without negative connotations attached. Once parents talk about it, teachers and other social spheres must also positively talk about mental health. Normalizing the issue across all social spheres and throughout childhood into adulthood is very important. The last point here in this slide talks about peer pressure among youth. Youth do follow one another's actions, both positively or negatively. And my friend named Keith, who is a youth pastor, recently told me a good example of this. When he was a youth pastor, there was 20 youth that he knew who banded together and planned on committing suicide. 6 of them ended up following through on the suicide, and Keith saw just how strong and influential peer pressure is in the area of mental health. This is why youth must be educated on mental health and how to seek help when they are struggling. It not only affects them, but their peers as well. On the next I'm going to be talking about how to recognize signs of mental illness. It is important to know that high schoolers will naturally struggle with things as they are growing up, and they will show symptoms that are not normal. So how do we learn to recognize normal versus abnormal signs of mental illness? This simple scale is helpful. It's a helpful continuum to know if you or someone you know may be struggling with mental health issues beyond what is healthy and normal. If things get to the point where there is long-lasting impairment in functioning, it is time to seek help. I hope that reading through this is practical and helpful for you in navigating how to recognize signs of mental health. And now Sarah Merritt is going to conclude our presentation for today.
So here are just some quick takeaways for you. Although educating and providing knowledge on mental illness is important, making an emotional connection is most impactful in reducing stigma. This needs to be a team effort. We all need to take personal responsibility in educating our youth on mental illness. Some of the most effective tools in reaching the youth can be social media and web-based interaction. And it's also important to use the resources you have and to be creative with those. Continuing to ignore the issue isn't an option. We need to connect, communicate, and meet people where they're at. By doing these things, the conversation regarding mental illness will become more normalized and the stigma is more likely to be reduced. By doing our part in reducing the stigma of mental illness, we are accepting one another as Christ accepted us in order to bring praise to God. And here are our references.